to all of you. The goal this evening is to encourage and inspire you if you have a need to deal with mental health or addiction issues yourself or within your own family or your circle of friends. I was assisted with the planning of this event by the Stigma-Free Englewood Task Force members, Dr. Sharon Bernstein, Jaleesa Brooks, Dan Daniel, Denise Dominguez, Liz Mary Espinal, Councilman Wayne Hamer, Danielle Lambert, Samuel Lee, Jonathan King, Lauren Menkes, Natasha Pinnell, Maggie Priest, Jan Ramos, and Joanne Venezio. They've done an amazing job providing a substitute for our annual town hall meeting that was to have taken place this past April. Hopefully we can reschedule that one in the not too distant future. So I want to thank you all again for attending. We have the Honorable Mayor Wilds with us this evening, and I'd like him to say hello to all of you.
Thank you, Deborah. First, do you have Facebook Live so other people in the community are seeing this?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you, Councilman Hamer and all this distinguished leaders from the health department. Wow, what a year difference makes. I think we were in a hospital in Englewood meeting and taking photographs and taking everything for granted when we were up in each other's smile distance. And now look at us talking with masks and through Zoom, how fragile life is and how appreciative we ought to be for the good blessings that we have. I want to thank you, Deborah, because you're single-handedly, with all the support of the beautiful people assembled here, reminding the citizenry of what's important. Everything is going to change in the next generation for citizens in our city, and for people undocumented, believe it or not, who are being affected inordinately more, and minorities through the COVID pandemic. The way we greet one another, to the way we think and we process experience. And we constantly need to remind ourselves of what's important. I want you to know I was asked by a gentleman who wanted to help with food inequities and insecurity in the city. And he said, what other things do you think affect the city where I can help finance and raise some funds? And I said, when it comes to matters of the mind and stigma and mental health. And sure enough, the gentleman then gave me a nice fat check for somebody who's doing all kinds of Zoom sessions, bringing in experts, psychologists, psychiatrists, trying to help adults and children learning from adults process all of this new normal. All I can say to you is we made it through the 1918. We look at the beautiful city of trees that we call Englewood, and we saw the roaring 20s that evolved after that. I'm prayerful that with the kind of leadership, the stewardship of the health department, with Jim Fedorko and yourself, Deborah, at the helm, that we're going to meet this challenge and that we'll meet it according to the needs of the community rather than perceptions. And whether it's the election or everything else that just passed us in a rearview mirror, we have to take stock and ultimately remind ourselves that we are a community that needs love and nurturing, and we have to be there for one another. So thank you, Sharon, and all the wonderful people that are assembled here for all the love that you give in between these kind of formal events. And please call on Wayne and myself and others at City Hall anytime we could be of service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Wilds. Okay, we're going to start with a PowerPoint presentation that explains what Stigma-Free is about. I can just get this up here.
A couple things from me off the record. Just
okay. Okay, so the slogan is Englewood is proud to be stigma-free, but what the heck does that mean anyway?
over the San Rafael Bridge.
The Cambridge English Dictionary defines stigma as a strong feeling of disapproval that most people in a society have about something, especially when it is unfair, or a strong lack of respect for a person or a group of people, or a bad opinion of them because they have done something society does not approve of. Being divorced or being an unwed mother carried social stigma and still does in some cultures. But what about this? How many of you have seen these signs around Englewood? Hoboken was the first stigma-free zone in the country in 2011 during a ceremony hosted by the Hudson County chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, better known as NAMI. 3 Hoboken High School students received proclamations for essays they wrote about mental illness and the challenges of dealing with somebody who has a mental illness. July 2013, the proposal to designate Paramus a stigma-free zone was developed out of a need from a concerned citizen, Mary Ann Uzi. She became aware of the effort to designate Hoboken a stigma-free zone through her work on the Care Plus New Jersey Board of Trustees, a mental health care organization headquartered in Paramus. She saw firsthand how stigma and fear prevent so many from seeking help, and also observed the positive outcomes for those who do receive treatment. Mary Ann made it a personal mission to bring community members and businesses together and bring the public awareness initiative to Paramus. Early in 2015, a small group of Englewood citizens, including Councilmember Wayne Hamer, approached the Director of Health about the need for mental health services and education in the community. In a follow-up meeting, they were presented with a copy of the Bergen County Stigma-Free Campaign Municipality Toolkit. It's quite a lengthy document, by the way. The framework for making Englewood a stigma-free zone was laid out, which included a formal resolution by the City Council adopted in July of 2015, and the creation of a task force comprised of volunteers to address the needs of the community.
Important. Today is the only days of this year you can update your coverage and benefits. Before the deadline, you're entitled.
These are some of the accomplishments. We've created a web page in cooperation with the Englewood Municipal Alliance. A tree planting ceremony was held to symbolize the elimination of the roots of stigma and the growing of awareness and compassion. We've purchased stigma-free signs that were installed at Englewood's major entry points. There are a total of 15 of these signs currently.
Get everything you're entitled to.
I called to get the
We've hosted 4 town hall meetings. Can somebody put your mute on?
This virus situation, I called
We've hosted 4 town hall meetings addressing mental health addiction. The first was Mental Health, Let's Talk About It. Then Mental Health, A Family Affair. Then Mental Health, Anxiety Solutions for Families. And the 4th was Gambling with Your Future, It's Risky. We facilitated 8 mental health first aid training courses, and Maggie, who's with us tonight, is one of my major co-trainer. Thank you, Maggie. I've been a certified mental health first aid trainer for 3 years now. We held a stigma-free poster contest for Genesee Dismissed Middle School students. We secured public health continuing education credits for mental health first aid training through the New Jersey Learning Management Network. I facilitated a stress management workshop for City of Englewood employees. I now have certification for stress management training also. We have secured so far $1,400 in mental health awareness grants from Bergen County Department of Health, Division of Mental Health. We secured $9,552 in grant funding as a special program of the Municipal Alliance from the Governor's Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse. And we've hosted wellness empowerment video conferences via Zoom related to COVID during the spring and summer of this year. Dr. Bernstein graciously donated her time to present the wellness empowerment seminars for 10 weeks for city employees and the public. So what's next? Again, we hope this virtual town hall meeting was next when I created this. Virtual workshops for teachers, parents, community members at large, and for students. We're working on the planning of that now. Outreach and tabling at scheduled Englewood community events, which, as you know, has been curtailed, unfortunately. and reschedule the town hall meeting with Darryl Strawberry as soon as it is possible. Due to the depletion of the funding for municipal alliance programs, only one program is supported this fiscal year. And it's called Reach and Teach Plus, and it includes, all of these workshops and the tabling events and all of our video conferences that we provide. And finally, here's a list of resources for mental health and addiction issues. We have treatment providers on our list. We have support programs, and Dr. Bernstein's Defining Moment Foundation is among those. And we have advocacy, information, and referral resource. These will be emailed to you after the meeting. And finally, how to connect with us. We have our webpage with email addresses. The Municipal Alliance has a Facebook page. And we post items of interest on the Englewood Health Department Twitter page and on Instagram page.
Great.
That, in a nutshell, is Stigma-Free.
At this time, our panelists will briefly tell you their personal stories. This will be followed by a question and answer period. You may type questions into the chat box or raise your hand feature if you are comfortable with the personal interaction. The panelists are Michael Weitzman, has recovered from bipolar disorder, and shares his story in both presentations and comments. Ellie Foreman is currently the community liaison and peer recovery support specialist for STRIVE. Aaliyah Montgomery is an Englewood resident and recent graduate of the Dwight Morrow Academies at England. She is currently at New Jersey State University. Michael, please begin.
Michael, before you start, we have a brief video too. I'm sorry. Let me just pull that up.
President of the Tyler Community Foundation. My son Tyler came out as a young gay man a couple of days before he went off to begin his freshman term at college. 3 weeks later, he committed suicide. Family then began the Tyler Community Foundation so that other parents and other kids wouldn't have to go through the kind of pain that he was through. What we do at the foundation is to build a structure of support in homes, families, churches, schools, and in the digital world itself. Talk for a minute about mental health care and stigma. I guess throughout recent history, mental health care has been stigmatized. If you go and seek it, you maybe fear for your job, maybe you're not going to get promoted, or people don't talk about it. So I want to talk for a minute about how we might destigmatize mental health care. And I think one of the ways is to make it more ubiquitous. If mental health care was realized by people as being as important as physical health care, I think that stigma would be largely removed. So what I would say to parents and for your children, your students, I think that it's important for you to know what's available on your campus as well. But that transition from high school to college, that freshman year is filled with a lot of things going on. And every college gets going.
No, it's not good. It's not the same. It has to be square. Sorry.
President of the Tyler Community Foundation. My son Tyler came out.
I'm going to use my phone.
A couple of days before he called to get his freshman term.
I have to have a square like this.
Later, he committed suicide.
Nope. That's not the same either. Sorry. Thanks for helping me, but I'm going to use the phone.
And Tyler Community Foundation students and other kids wouldn't have to go through the kind of pain that you went through and that we went through. What we do at the foundation is to build an infrastructure of support in homes, families, churches, schools, and in the digital world as well. Talk for a minute about mental health care and stigma. I guess throughout recent history, mental health care has been stigmatized. If you go and seek it, you maybe fear for your, maybe you're not going to get promoted, or people are going to talk about it. So I want to talk to you how we might destigmatize mental health care. And I think one of the ways is to make it more ubiquitous. If mental health care was realized by people as being as important as physical health care, I think that stigma would be largely removed. So what I would say to parents and to your children, your students, I think that it's important for you to know what's available on your campus as well. But that transition from high school to college, that freshman year, is filled with a lot of things going on. And every college gives you orientation, and you listen to a lot of stuff, and you walk out the door, maybe you remember 10% of it. But I think it's important for you to build a network of friends or people around you that you feel comfortable with asking questions. Always remember, you can't be expected to know everything that's available to you on campus. A lot of colleges out there that have great initiatives already in place, and there's some that not so much. And it's important that you know what's available, but you're not expected to know everything. You need to ask someone else. Oh yeah, I remember we talked about that at orientation. And that puts a thought in your head without seeking help, and that's what you can do. And that's what I would say to the kids, is that it was such a painful event that I don't want it to happen with some other family. And if that in a way is nurturing Tyler, fine. And if it helps prevent someone else from going through what we went through, then I think it's worth it. I think that's the reason that people are.
Hello, I'm Gina Renee and Drakeford, and I'd like to give you a little background information about my journey. From the age of 14, I was diagnosed with depression. By the age of 21, my illness had surfaced in such a way that no longer was diagnosed. My biggest problem was that I made my biggest mistake. I was always in treatment. It was never open to receive. I always thought I knew what was best. To my disappointment, and to everyone who loved me and cared about me, family and friends, they felt lost and helpless, and I felt hopeless. Although it was my fault to a great degree, one is responsible for being open to receiving care from the health professionals that are in their that they're being treated by. I was told by a psychiatrist, never take yourself off your medication. But I knew all the answers. Why I was getting out and out? As soon as I started feeling much better, I take the medication and take it and flush it down the toilet and try to convince everybody I loved who knew me that I was feeling so much better. I didn't need this stuff anymore. I didn't need it, but rest assured, within maybe sometimes 2 weeks, other times it lasted for 3-4 months, but always there was a relapse. Because what I'm trying to say to them, and I'm trying to say to you, hey, if I can do it, you can do it too. And I would just like to close with a poem that I wrote, and it has followed me for many, many years. And it goes like this. I may be down, but never out. I'm sure to rise again.
Yes, you.
When I do, I'm coming back fighting
Hang up your phone.
all the strength I have within. If I can do it, you can do it too. Recognize your strength, recognize your weaknesses, and be open to
Yeah, man.
and
Working. Yeah.
joy in the journey. And my spirituality was the first thing that opened me up to receive it. What a wonderful program like Care Plus of New Jersey had to offer me. It has changed my life into almost a decade, free from bondage.
I'm Amanda. Hi, I'm Brittany. Oh, yeah, I like to talk. In my case. Yeah. And you're not able to trust people usually because you're always on guard, you're always concerned with. I locked my room, locked up all my stuff with that. I forget where I hide things sometimes. Your home is supposed to be like your sanctuary. Not at all. You're always worried that it's going to get into something fine, which is fine. Even when you're saying you're going to blame them, it's horrible, but you don't look at those people as people anymore. You look at them like a thing, like straight up as an elementary. You can't see them who they are as a person anymore. I feel like with certain programs is they don't really focus on the core issue at hand, why this all happened, and how to rehabilitate somebody's life. They make you go through different groups and reach different goals and go to different meetings, but they're not really individualizing it, and they're not really helping you formulate a plan and say, okay, when I get out of this program, how am I going to get a job? Then how am I going to get how many states are in that life? How am I going to get in my own place? How am I going to do that with all the stresses of the real world and then still be able to stay safe? They don't really focus on that. They just focus on meeting their certain quota, what they have to do for you, and then you're gone. You're just like a number. You're not really cared for individually, which I think is a shame. So a lot of people get lost. Definitely beneficial. I think everybody has different programs out there. I think we must be ready to throw themselves into like NAA. Like in my experience, people that I've known don't want to go put themselves out there like that. They don't want to characterize themselves with those people, even though it is who they are. But they come in terms with themselves. It's almost shameful for them. So I think sometimes they'd rather stay behind closed doors than they go out in a big room and stand up and say, you know, they're an addict for whatever reason, but it comes to people that don't really know. I think the inpatient, I mean, I don't know too much, but from what I know, the inpatient units aren't really doing what they were set out to do. I mean, those programs, at the end of the day, once you go and you experience, you realize that there's a lot of different types of people and they're from all walks of life, and that there's somebody that you can relate to a certain extent. Even if you go and you get a fragment of what something that someone says is can be really back to your life and you've gotten something out of it. But you have to be willing to want to make that change for yourself, for your family. And I think all those programs also help for the families to get together and talk openly and just kind of like see ping pong back and forth as like what their experience was, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. Helping them and so different programs like that. It really educates you on how to not enable and how to not feed into the drama and their illness. I separate yourself and keep yourself preserved so you can help yourself and help them at the same time. You can take care of yourself first.
Okay. Michael, please go. You have to unmute yourself. Let me do it.
Unmuted.
There you go.
There you go. I started, just to give you an idea, I'm going to give you the cliff notes of my mental health life. I used to stutter when I was 5 years old. That started my trauma in my life, even at the age of 5. And then I had a normal childhood, no problem, until I got to 16, and I failed my Never did, and I failed it 3 times. I eventually passed on my 4th, but that was the most traumatic thing that I went through at the age of 16, and that really started my unfortunate journey of having a mental illness, but I was suffering in silence. So I did know something was going on, but I didn't do anything. But that traumatic scene of being 16 and basically failing my road test really started my mental health journey, which was not good at that time. So during that time, for about 40 years, I'll give you the overview, I suffered and suffered in silence with my that finally came in the age when I was 40, about 1999. That's when I call it coming out of the mental health closet. And what I mean by that is I finally decided, you know what? I got to get help. I got to see a psychiatrist. I got to take some medicine, and I got to see a therapist. So I call that the triangle. And I would be doing the triangle for many years. So I would come out, and I got diagnosed, just to let you know, as a bipolar. And bipolar, to me, I was bipolar 2. They have very, similar things together. It used to be called manic depression. And I used to have, you usually with bipolar, you have the lows and the highs. You have the overlapping symptoms of manic episodes, changes in mood. But to let you know, bipolar 1, or increased energy, racing thoughts, lack of sleep, you're irritable, aggressive, hallucinations. That's just name a few of bipolar 1. But for me, I had bipolar 2, mainly when I used to have less energy, fairly good connection with reality, feeling more creative and productive. Boy, was I creative. In a better mood, sleep more, and I would isolate all the time and lost a lot of my interest in doing things. And that's what the thing about bipolar, you can have a mixture of bipolar 1 and 2 together. So that was, I was diagnosed back then in 1999. And then basically during this time, I was in the mortgage industry and I was making unbelievable money. So you would say, why would I be suffering when I'm making all the, because money has nothing to do with depression, or bipolar depression is what I had. And so money that from all those years from 1987 to 2007 was my antidepressant. That's what I call it. So when I wasn't making enough money, money was getting tight, I would get nervous, I would get worried, and that's when the mental illness would come in. And that was coming in from basically from 2005 to 2014, where I really suffered so much mental illness, my bipolar depression. And times I was also married, I had 2 beautiful girls, but then in January in 2008 was the day, that was the day I tried to take my life. That was the day
Yeah.
What?
Where did he go to?
He's having trouble.
is that I had the support of my parents. If I didn't have my parents, I don't know what I'd do. So I decided what happened during this time, closer to 2014, on August 11, 2014, if you want to know that date, was the date that changed my life. That was the day that suicide took Robin Williams' life. And I was tormented with that because I'm a I went into my 6th hospital stay on October 16, 2014. And at that time, that was my 6th hospitalization in a psychiatric hospital. And I made a decision. When I got in there, I said, I want to do something that I've never done before. Since I suffered in silence for 40 years with my mental health condition, I want to now get well, but stay mentally well. And that was my goal. So while I was in a psychiatric hospital, I would come up with things called and gum. I would come up with a workshop called the Three Amigos that you can see over there. My computer died, so I'm doing this from my phone. I came up with a workshop called the Three Amigos of Mental Health, and it's all about getting rid of the stigma of mental illness, telling my unbelievable story, getting people to deal with acceptance and opening up, and using wellness tools, and most importantly, using humor. So that was my goal while I was in a psychiatric hospital, and I got discharged on October 29, 2014. And that was amazing because that I just celebrated my 6th year anniversary of staying mentally well. You see, the problem is I always got better, then I always got sick again. I call that the cave of hell, the ticking time bomb when I do my workshop. I always got better, but then I always got sick again. So the key was, what can I do to get me to the promised land? Now, I was doing the triangle. Remember the triangle? Taking the medicine, seeing the psychiatrist, and doing the talker. The talker was a therapist, and I did the triangle. But that didn't get me to the promised land. I did have my support staff with my parents and some other friends, but it didn't get me to where I needed to go. I would always get sick again and then get sick. So it was just trying to find the right combination, which I did in October 29, 2014. I found the right medicine, I found the right psychiatrist, and I found the right therapist. That took a long time to find that combination. And I tell people, it takes a long time sometimes to find that combination. So I did find that combination, but it was really what got me to the promised land, and was getting mentally well and staying mentally well for over 6 years, was using all of these types of wellness tools. Now you're telling me, what type of wellness tools, Michael? The wellness tools that I would use that got me to stay mentally well, besides the triangle and the support, was doing meditation, doing deep breathing exercises, doing affirmations, doing a creed, a prayer, God, Bible, Jesus, acupuncture, hypnosis. I tried so many different types of wellness tools. I would be into Wayne Dyer, who's fantastic, self-improvement tapes that he does, Deepak Chopra, reading books like The 4 Agreements. These are what got me to finally stay mentally well. And I stress that so much to the audience, is that we always can get better, but I don't want to get sick again. So it was really all the combination of the medicine, psychiatry, and the talker, therapist, but it was the wellness tools that got me to get well. And the biggest and the most favorite of mine was humor, using humor as my biggest wellness tool. And I have right here, as you can see, was one of my favorite was Patch Adams. And Patch Adams is a movie I recommend everyone to watch. I also recommend Silver Lining Playbook. I recommend Will Hunt. There are so many mental health movies that are amazing, that can help you and inspire you, which inspired me. So it was all of these wellness tools that got me well, and then using humor. And when I do my workshop, the reason is it's not just doing humor and laughter and smiles. Why do you want to use humor and laughter and smiles in your life? It will boost your immune system. It really will help. The endorphins lift your mood. That's why humor, laughter, smile is so important.
2 minutes, Michael.
It alleviates stress and anxiety. Yes?
2 minutes.
You say? Okay. So it will improve, and it will also make you live a longer life. So what I became, when I got out of that hospital, I became a professional mental health speaker, performer, advocate, peer support specialist, and comedian. And it's all about how can you stay and stay mentally well, just like myself. I make it cool and fun and enjoyable and humorous and helpful to talk and work on your mental health and your mental health challenges. I show what it's like and what it tastes like and it feels like to have a mental health condition. It's about having fun with your mental health, not making fun, having fun, and using a centered person approach that I use, finding someone's strength. So I use, success to me is using your passion to give value in helping everyone. And that's what I do in the mental health field. I'm working on my book, I'm working on a documentary and a movie because I believe I can make a difference in this world because I can relate to the people. It's called the three amigos of mental health. The three amigos are either you're suffering with a mental health condition, you're suffering in silence, or you're not suffering at all. I want to help all three amigos to help and support one another to be friends. So I'm involved with MHA, NAMI, mental health organizations. I use my props, is the brain, and passion and humor to really make a difference in people's life. And the most important thing is, it doesn't matter if you have a mental illness or a disability or a chronic illness, or if you're elderly or have an addiction. It's all about, doesn't matter what you are inside and out. You know why? Because we are all created equal. And I'm working to get that equality in this world, even if you have a mental health condition, because people for all these years have gotten treated terribly if they have something wrong with their mental health. And I'm trying to make a difference in this world. And Michael Weitzman, bipolar, no longer, using wellness tools and humor to get you to stay mentally well.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And I did this from my phone because my computer wire went in the water and my charger doesn't work. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Ellie.
Hi, just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Ellie Foreman. I am the community liaison and peer recovery specialist at Strive Health. I am also an incoming graduate student at UPenn studying public culture, and most importantly to this conversation, I'm in recovery from addiction. I just wanted to thank everyone that organized this event also and all the great work that you're doing around eradicating stigma. It's a really important event to have, it's a really important topic, and it's a really important thing to educate people on, and I get really passionate about it. So I'm really excited to be here and to kind of give a little bit about my story and touch base on a little bit of stigma too. And before I delve into my personal story, I wanted to talk about something that's really meaningful for me looking back at it in retrospect. So I think about my view on drug addicts or on people suffering with addiction from before I suffered with addiction, you know, from when I was maybe sitting where some of the audience members are sitting, not physically, but metaphorically, or when I was in high school and we would have somebody come in and present on drugs. And thinking back to how I looked on it, it was an issue that just felt really far away from me, really foreign, and something that couldn't happen to me. And, you know, even after being educated on the topic, I assumed that people with addiction were criminals or homeless people or people that made really bad choices in life and had disastrous ramifications because of it. And I didn't think it was something that could happen to someone like me, you know, someone that comes from a good family, educated. It felt really far away to me. But it wasn't. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about these things in the community. So I'll tell a little bit about my story now. So I was born and raised in Bergen County in Teaneck, New Jersey. And the first time I used alcohol was the night before high school. I remember high school was approaching. I felt really scared to start high school. I felt, you know, I took up too much space. I felt like I didn't fit in with my peers. And it was kind of this overwhelming sense of fear and anxiety around starting high school. And I didn't know anything about alcohol, but what I had kind of seen in the movies or on commercials is that when people are afraid or nervous about something, they take a drink and all of a sudden they're chatty and the anxiety goes away. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, if I'm experiencing anxiety, I take a drink and there we go, no more anxiety. So that's what I did. I took a drink. I didn't know anything about alcohol, like I said. I didn't know you weren't supposed to mix light and dark alcohol. I just poured everything I could find in my parents' liquor cabinet into a giant bottle and just drank it. And I ended up getting really sick that night. But I remember very clearly, before everything kind of became fuzzy, I looked in the mirror, and to myself, nobody was around me. You know, I literally said it out loud to myself, this is it. This is the solution. This is what's going to make me feel better. And that's what it was. It was a form of self-medicating. And, you know, but addiction is a progressive illness. So as time went on, my addiction got worse. I was offered weed for the first time in high school. And again, I took it because I was feeling some type of emptiness inside. And I was like, well, maybe if I do this with these people, I'll feel connected to them, or they'll like me better, or I'll feel like I fit in. And, you know, slowly but surely, I progressed to different substances. And, you know, when I got to college and I had the stress of tests and new social interactions hanging over my head, and, you know, when life just felt a little bit too difficult to show up to some days, I would take different substances to help me show up to my life. Whether that was something to help me stay up to get all my work done, or whether that was something to help me sleep because I had been up all week, whatever it was, I would find different things to fill those needs in my life. And at no point was it something I was doing because I wanted to party. I mean, sometimes I would go to a party and use something, but more so the addiction came from a place of self-medication. And now that I'm in recovery, I understand also it was a spiritual and emotional void that I was trying to throw a bunch of substances into, and that void would never be filled with those substances. And it all kind of culminated about 4 years ago when I went down to South Florida to get treatment for the final time. I'd been to a couple of rehabs before then, but nothing really stuck in my brain. And I went back to what I was doing shortly after. But at this point, I had experienced some really low lows. I had a bunch of friends who had been using similar substances to me, who had overdosed. I was starting to see RIP statuses on Facebook of people my age, young people, you know, going out using something, not knowing what's in it and dying. I had given CPR to a girl who I had been using with when she overdosed. Shortly after, I overdosed myself, and kind of the culmination of all these events instilled a little bit of fear in me and made me realize, you know, I wanted to live just a little bit more than my brain wanted to keep using drugs. And that's what it was. It felt like a war, me versus my brain, you know, like I wanted to live, but my brain was like, this is what we need to live, you know, and that was the struggle. But I went to treatment that time, and something stuck with me, and I did a lot of work on myself, and it was a lot of what Michael talked about too, that trifecta of intensive therapy, medication management, you know, but I also went to 12-step meetings, other mutual aid groups, but more importantly, and the most important, was relearning how to live without that substance and relearning how to show up to life without putting something in my body to be able to. And that was the biggest thing for me. And that's the thing that now I think is really cool. I get to pass that on to others in the work that I'm doing now. You know, in my work as a peer recovery specialist at Strive, I do a lot of one-to-one peer work, doing everything from vocational coaching and resume building to helping clients set goals that really emphasize their strengths and build them up, and just relearning how to live and show up to life, relearning who they are, what their priorities are, what they want to accomplish, and learning that they can do it without something in their body. And that's been really powerful for me now to be able to pass that on to others. Another really cool thing I get to do today is events like this and speaking about the stigma and awareness. I've told my story on NBC News in recovery, and somebody asked me once, like, how are you okay with sharing all these personal details about your life on NBC News? And my answer is always the same. You know, if it helps even one person feel a little bit less alone, or it helps one person go seek help when they hear my story, or when they hear that this isn't something to be ashamed of, you know, then it's all worth it. And yeah, and touching on that too, on the importance of this stigma-free concept, it's a really vital thing to have, because somebody in addiction already experiences shame with using. And that's like a biological neuroscience fact that I learned since being sober. You know, when you're using drugs addictively, you're bypassing your prefrontal cortex to use that drug. And your prefrontal cortex is usually the part of your brain that is the more logical part, that does risk management, risk assessment. And when you're using it addictively, though, you're literally bypassing that because your survival mechanisms are kicking in, or your emotional urges are kicking in, and it bypasses that. And that automatically produces shame, like biologically. And So, I mean, if you think about it kind of in an example that's maybe relatable to everyone, if you have a plate of French fries and you tell yourself, I'm only going to have a few French fries and then I'm going to stop. And then you eat those few French fries and all of a sudden you're reaching for another one. And then you're going up to the counter and ordering another plate, you know, and then you feel shameful about it. But why? If you look at it objectively, there's nothing morally wrong with eating French fries. Why do we feel that shame? And it's because we're engaging in a behavior that bypasses that prefrontal cortex. And so when we already have that internal shame associated with addiction, it's so important to get rid of the societal shame on top of that. You know, if somebody's already feeling embarrassed or shameful or guilty about their addiction, it's so important for me and, you know, to do whatever work I can to help people feel that there's not additional judgers and barriers to seeking help coming from society. And that's why I'm really grateful for you guys having an event like this and for all the work you do in the community to eradicate the shame. And, you know, no one wakes up and decides to have a mental health issue or an addiction. Nobody wakes up and chooses that. It's something that people fall into, that it's a sickness, you know, like anything else. And I really think that the more you get rid of stigma and the more we work to eradicate that stigma and educate people, the more people are going to be motivated and willing to seek help, you know, and just get help for their issues at a place like Strive or anywhere, you know, just seek help and open up to people and really get the help they need. So we don't have to have more RIP statuses or more horrible statistics about overdose deaths. So anyways, that's my bit. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Aaliyah?
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Montgomery. I'm 19 years old and I'm a freshman currently at NJCU, New Jersey City University. I'm a recent graduate of Dwight Morrow Academies in Englewood. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as well when I was 17 years old. And that was after working with a few different teams of psychiatrists and psychologists because being young, you know, my mental health journey started over a lot of times. You know, I wasn't confident enough in making a decision to get help. So I started over many times with a lot of different psychiatrists and psychologists, and I finally got a diagnosis at the age of 17, where I was first diagnosed with major depressive disorder and OCD, and then I began taking an antidepressant called Lexapro. And now with the research that I know, for many people with bipolar disorder, taking antidepressants usually triggers mania, and that is exactly what happened. So looking back, taking Lexapro is what actually led to my diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So I was on Lexapro for about 4 months, and I remember like feeling really great. I felt amazing, and it was really great for my family and friends because, you know, a couple months prior, they were just expressing their concerns for me. I was beginning to feel tired all the time. My grades were slipping. I was cutting hours at work, and I was explaining to my boss that I need to cut my hours at work for school, but when I was coming home from school, I was just going to sleep. But once I was on that Lexapro, it was a complete 360 for me. And I went from coming home from school at 3 and taking long naps until about 8 or 9, and then going to bed at 11 p.m., just staying up for probably 2 or 3 hours just to complete as much homework as I could before I felt like I couldn't even do that. And then I had a 360, and I started sleeping for 2 to 3 hours a night. And sometimes I could go nights without sleeping at all. And I went from being super meticulous and calculated to being very risky and nonchalant. Like I wasn't afraid of anything. I didn't register that there were consequences for a lot of my actions, and there could have been more serious consequences to many of the actions that I was taking during that time. So I had that overconfidence, and due to that overconfidence, I stopped taking my medication. And in the amount of time that it took for the medication to get into my body, into my bloodstream, it came out, and what I now know as mania left, and I just started to feel that intense depression that usually comes after a manic episode. And even to this day, it's still nothing that I've ever experienced before. That time in my life was a very, very dark period for me, and I was very drained. I was constantly anxious. And I think because those were the only two emotions that I was really battering, it developed into anger. And I stopped talking to my friends. I began isolating myself from the people who knew me the most. And, I was so mean to my parents, my friends, because I just felt like I was in this alone. I felt like nobody could understand the emotions that I was going through. I felt like I could not even articulate the extent and the gravity of the situation that I was in, that I was myself experiencing. And I finally got to the point where I decided to restart therapy. And then I found a new psychiatrist that, I thought I would just have a conversation, let her know that, I felt great on Lexapro. And, I just want that prescription again. But she really took the time to talk to me and see what led to a lot of the experiences that I had, even while on Lexapro, and allowing me to identify those behaviors that were negative. And then I got the diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So accepting my diagnosis is currently still a challenge for me, to be honest. I found myself and still do find myself equating my personality and sometimes even my intelligence with my disorder. And so I find myself using that as an excuse, not to get help. And there were times when I found myself, craving mania so that I could, just pull myself out of this depression long enough to knock out the assignments that I had fallen behind on and to get things, crossed off my to-do list that, was on there for weeks and I really need to get done. And even now, after being diagnosed for almost 2 years, I am still rewriting that thought process. I'm taking time to remind myself that, I don't get to not take this seriously because it's not something that people can see all the time. And that's actually why I need to take it more seriously because, everyone lives their own life. And there could come a time where, the erratic and destructive and self-sabotaging behavior that I was showing to my family, that allowed them to identify these changes in me. There might be a time where it won't be loud enough. It won't be intense enough for them to, get me or push me to get help. I had to start doing that part for myself. I had to start being self-aware and identifying these negative behaviors in myself because I was starting to go down a very destructive path that if I didn't take myself up out of that at that time, it would have been, I don't even know if I would have been here right now, 2 years later. But my diagnosis has still been one of the biggest lessons I've learned so far. It taught me, what the reality of a journey really is. It can be complex and it can be tiring, but it can also be rewarding and full of accomplishments along the way. And for a lot of people, they have a lot of familiar support. But when my behavior was most destructive, when I was reflecting, my biggest support system actually came from, a small group of women, a family that I'd found and created in school at Dwight Morrow High School through a youth-based service called The Zone, which is funded through Brigham Family Center. And they were there for me every step of the way. They made me a priority when, I wasn't even making myself a priority. And, they encouraged me and they uplifted me every day. It was that family dynamic that really taught me, valuable lessons about community, about womanhood, and about what real support looks like so that I can then reciprocate that to other people. And, due to COVID, I never really got the chance to really tell them what their efforts really meant to me because I didn't, end up getting to really complete my senior year. But Ms. Miriam is not here right now, but she's one of the leaders there at The Zone, and she's an amazing woman, amazing mentor. She's a friend and a great support system to me. Like, words couldn't even express my gratitude towards her. And she was one of the first people to tell me that, I deserve stability and that I deserve peace of mind, and that surviving, just wasn't really enough. Like living day to day on a routine, not feeling true happiness, not feeling real emotions, and that I deserved to have a story that I was proud of, and that I deserved to have a story that I wanted to tell to other people. And, that is what kept me pushing even when I felt like I couldn't keep going. And, my personal fight with stigma comes from, phrases like, when I try to articulate some of the struggles that I'm going through and I get, the response like, you're so smart, or you're so articulate, you're so confident, you always have this together, you always look a certain way. It's always about how it looks on the outside. But, and so I started almost devaluing my struggle, almost trying to put it back on a back burner because I felt like, people
farther away are dealing with so many different circumstances. There are people who are dealing with hunger and homelessness. Like, crying for a couple of days straight is nothing compared to not having a home. So I started to compare, my struggle, and that really, deterred some of my progress with my mental health journey. But, it got to a point where that I had to realize that these stereotypes are what are costing people like me, people that look like me, women of color, young people, that these are the stereotypes and stigmas that are costing us our lives. And that's why I decided that I was going to make a commitment to, changing these things. And even when I was growing up, I was very persistent that I wanted to go to medical school, I wanted to be a doctor. And it was in my junior year of high school that I decided that I wanted to be a psychology major. And now I am a current psychology major and public health minor at New Jersey City University. But overall, my diagnosis has been an amazing learning experience. It taught me to be thankful for family and friends, and even respect their bravery and support, and identifying behaviors that they see in me, being able to communicate those behaviors that they see in me, no matter what my reaction may be at the time. They take that step to let me know that they care and they see what's going on and they're here for me. And, it reminds me to be kind to myself every day, to be grateful for the good days and to cherish them and to remember them, journal those down, be very specific. So on the very, very hard days, I can go back and read those and remember that, there were good days and there were days where I was successful and I made it through the day. And that even when I do have bad days, that the bad days, it doesn't eradicate all the progress, doesn't erase, it doesn't get rid of all the things that I've been through to get to this point, but even those experiences continue to build me up. So I really do thank you guys for this platform for me to share my story for the very first time, dealing with mental health struggles, what a lot of people like to associate with high functioning, but mental illness is mental illness. It affects anyone. It doesn't matter what color, it doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter what class, it affects anybody. But I do want to thank you for this platform, and thank you for listening to my story and giving me a chance to tell my story.
Thank you, Aaliyah. I want to thank Michael, Ellie, and Aaliyah for your inspiring stories. I'm reminded of something that our county executive says in many of the events that he goes to for Stigma-Free. If you break your leg or have hip surgery, or if you have a heart attack, your neighbors, your family, they all come to see if you're okay or bring you some food. If you have a mental health illness, where is everybody? They don't want to know about it. So this is what we're trying to break so that that doesn't happen anymore. Thank you, all of you. If you all in the audience have questions, you can put them in the chat box. You can direct them to someone in particular. If you want someone in particular to answer it, please say so. Denise, you have some questions for them?
Started, I wanted to make Aaliyah aware that Miriam is on the meeting and she did hear you thank her.
I'm sorry, say again?
I just wanted to make Aaliyah aware that Miriam is on the call and she did hear you thank her.
Hi, Aaliyah.
Did you want to say anything to her, Miriam?
I think Aaliyah has really, I can never speak after Aaliyah because she is such an eloquent speaker. But Aaliyah has done all the work on her own and she really had the courage, and I will acknowledge that in front of everybody. Aaliyah, you really are a very courageous person and really a formidable leader amongst your peers. And you really do set a really great, you're a really great role model for other people around you to have courage to really seek the supports that they need. And I know that you've done that for many of your friends. So they're very lucky to have you. We're very lucky to have you. Aaliyah actually was one of our superstar interns as well. She kept us all in check with everything. So thank you for that, Aaliyah. And I'm glad we were able to still stay connected. So thank you, Aaliyah, for everything.
So I will ask a question here, and whichever panelist wants to answer, this one's very open. How can I support a family member who is struggling with mental illness?
Michael, you want to take that?
Can you just say that question one more time? My hearing aids weren't working on that one.
How can I support a family member who is struggling with mental health?
Well, just like what I went through, my parents, they actually know what it tastes like and what it feels like to have a mental illness or have a mental health condition. So it's important that the other people that are watching someone that has a mental illness realize first that it's real, it exists, they didn't do anything wrong, it's not their fault. And I really tell people, and Deborah just said this before, it's like, imagine if you got blamed for having cancer. Why do we get blamed for having a mental illness? There should not be. It should be exactly the same or anything. So when certain people in the family are dealing with someone in their family that is suffering with a mental health condition, we need to make them still understand that they're just the same as we are. There is no difference just because they might be struggling. And the key is to really help them in so many different ways you can help them. Not pity, but really understand, like, I can really understand what you're going through. I've done my research. Let them research about different types of, whether it's bipolar, whether it's a certain type of anxiety or schizophrenia, whatever you're going through, have the family members research a little bit of what's going on. Also, there's so many organizations like NAMI, that's called Family and Family, and they speak together. MHA, very big organizations that do this to get the family involved so they can understand, you know what, she is going through or he's going through something, but you know what? I'm going to be there for them and realize, they're going through the recovery, and I'm going to be there with them along with that support. And I really believe there's so many different resources that the family can do, and realizing that you don't want the family to stigmatize. They want them to say that, my family members, whoever that they're going through, that they're working on the recovery. I'm going to be there for the good days, and I'm going to be there for the bad days. And that is really the most important thing. I was able to get that with my parents, but there are many people that do not have an adequate or really good support staff in their life. And I tell people, yeah, that is so important.
Michael, someone has a question for you. Helen asked, were you still married when you went through all of these hospitalizations? Were your relationships with your wife and children, how were your relationships with your wife and children? You spoke about your parents, but not about them.
Well, the reason is I only had 12 minutes. If I had longer time, I would tell you, but right now with that question, I had the most unloving and most unsupportive wife that you can ever get. And unfortunately, I called her a third amigo, which meant that she didn't have a mental health condition. And she was one of the people that didn't believe that I was suffering with a mental illness. She just thought I was just lazy, or I didn't want to play with the kids. She doesn't understand if I was laying in the couch and my head was in the pillow. She thought I was just faking it. So yes, when I was married, it was a double whammy, not having support from my wife, and then having to deal with my children, and it was very difficult. I did the best I could when I was married with the younger children, but it was the hardest thing I can go through, because you need that support, as I said to you before, and I did not get the support from my wife. The kids did not realize because they were too young. They realize now because they're 26 and 23, and they know dad is doing unbelievably well, but worked hard to get there and suffered for many years. So that's an amazing question. I talk about it in my workshop because it was a double whammy for me, because all my wife worried about is the money. You're in the mortgage business and now you're not making that much money. That's who I got treated, and I was getting beat up by her left and right. So it really hurt me, and that's why I did something bad on January 2nd, 2008. And now I'm able to go from really recovery. I went from discovery to recovery, and now I've gone from recovery to discovery. And those are my words that I love.
Helen thanks you.
You're welcome.
Let's see. Ellie, was it hard for you to get someone you trust to listen to you? Whether it be a friend or family member?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. So initially, when I first reached out for help, because I didn't have the motivation to do the research myself to get in anywhere. And so when I first reached out for help when I was really struggling, I kind of did it impulsively when I was under the influence of substances and quickly texted my parents and said, hey, I'm struggling with drugs. I don't want to get into it, but I need help. So I think there was like a lot of shame and guilt in reaching out for help, even, you know, even when I was really needed it, there was that kind of barrier to getting help because I felt like I was doing something wrong with what I was doing. Which is why I think this whole stigma-free thing is so important. But yeah, I would say it was hard to find someone. Probably with friends, it was a little bit easier. And definitely once I was in recovery and sober and able to talk about my experience, even in early recovery, I remember feeling a little bit more like I had the door open to kind of talk about my experiences in the past tense and felt okay about that. But definitely in that present tense, it was really hard to find someone who I felt like would listen to me and not judge me. But I guess that ties into what Michael was saying about the importance of having support and finding those people who can support you through those things. So.
And then I'll ask Aaliyah this question. How can I start the talk about stigma-free and mental health? So we try to do these programs for everyone and get people to join. How do you think, what other ways can we start the conversation so that we can all better assist and help others?
One thing that I've found that worked for me, especially among peers, is kind of like the terminology, you know, how I phrase it. A lot of times, you know, breaking down that stigma is not always associating things like anxiety with, you know, just being like physically jittery or like panic attacks. Associate, like letting people know, like, you know, overthinking about small situations are also examples of anxiety. Being sad for a longer periods of time are not just like, you know, PMSing, especially for like my female friends, or, you know, just dealing with things like these are, you don't necessarily have to put a label on it, but help them identify behaviors that are not so, that are not necessarily okay, that identify those early behaviors that you see in friends. Like, for example, I had a friend that I ended up, you know, outletting to the zone because she was constantly telling me about her emotional struggles, about feeling sad, about feeling overwhelmed. And she wasn't ready to put a label to it yet, but she knew that she needed help. And for me, knowing, being in an experience similar to hers, even though it wasn't due to the same circumstances, I knew that I had to break down these, you know, what she was also experiencing for her, you know, relating to her, letting her know that, you know, I experienced this too, and this is why I sought help. You know, I did notice this, you know, these emotions in myself too, and this is also why it led me to getting help.
Thank you.
I think we have time for two more.
Okay. Do you agree that these statements are comforting or not? And when was the first time you heard this from a trusted friend? I am here for you. You are not alone.
I'll start, I guess, but I want the other ones to speak to too. Those are very, very powerful words. And we all need that. We all need that in our life, especially if we're struggling with addiction or struggling with any type of mental health condition. You need, as I said to you before regarding support, we need those people whether it's employers or friends, family, it doesn't really make a difference. You need those people to be there with you and go for the long haul, because there's going to be a bumpy ride a lot of times during the journey and during the recovery. So I just say, if those people, I have so many good close friends they know when I was unbelievably sick. They know what it's all about. So I would just say that is beautiful that what you just said, this question, because all I can say is that's exactly when people are suffering. They want to hear those words, and they want to know that they have your back, and they're really going to support you.
Ellie, do you feel the same about those words?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that other part of the question too, and it was like, when was the first time that you heard that? Or I was thinking about the first time I really believed it. And for me, it was actually when I walked into my first 12-step meeting. And, the 12-step meetings were a part of my recovery. They weren't all of my recovery. I went to some for a while. I'm not so involved with it, but I do remember the feeling of walking into one and hearing some other woman talk about her experience. And then I raised my hand to introduce myself as a newcomer, and she came over to me after and said, "Hey, you're not alone. We're all here for the same reason." And that was really powerful for me, and that was game changing. And I'm hearing about the other versions of fellowship that Aaliyah and Michael had too in their own recoveries. I think there is something really powerful about a fellowship, but also about a forum that's open for people to talk about things and not just tell you that they're there for you, but allow you to be there for them too, and to really openly share and exchange struggles in a way that's judgment-free, stigma-free. And I do think they're very powerful statements, especially when it's reciprocal and both people can share and be there for each other,
Thank you so much.
Aaliyah, did you want to respond to that also?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ellie. Like, I feel like that phrase, that it just means a lot more when you know that it's reciprocated. And some of my best and most well-functioning relationships are with people who also struggle with mental illness, because we are able to identify behaviors in each other, that stand out. We are able to comfort each other. And when they tell me that, I'm not alone, I really feel it, because I know that these are emotions that they've experienced, at least one time, even though it might not be the same way, but they know what it's like to be, sad, what it's like to feel dread, to not want to necessarily go on another day. But we encourage each other, to keep pushing, and we inspire each other. So I definitely do believe that those words mean a lot.
Thank you.
We're going to wrap up now. I want to thank everybody again for participating, and especially to our panelists for agreeing to present. If you would please, I want to remind you to please complete the survey that you'll receive by SurveyMonkey. And I hope to see you all again at another event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Here, everyone, have a good rest of your night.